We are in Acts chapter 17. Acts 17. You can see up there in the top right corner, it says Class 11-09. The book that's going to come out in 2037, 2038. This corresponds with lesson 11 for that. But this is our 9th session looking at the second half of Acts, Acts 13 through 28. And today we find Paul in Athens, and this is only Paul's second speech. He will have a total of 7, and you can see the first one is the longest. We've already looked at that one when Paul was at Antioch in Pisidia on his first journey. He is right now on his second journey, and then at the tail end of his third journey, he will speak with the Ephesian elders on his way back to Jerusalem. And I'll remind you of some of these, but you can see the word count on these. This one here is 192 words. I think Luke probably condensed it a little bit. You know how long it takes to read 192 words? Less than 2 minutes. And we're going to read it together when we get to it. His speech begins in verse 22. But we need to first look at verses 16 through 21 very carefully together, because it has a lot of extremely important information that will help us understand this extremely important speech at the Areopagus. That's a nice fancy word. Some of you will have in your translation that Paul went to Mars Hill. Do you know what the difference between Areopagus and Mars Hill is? Nothing. They both mean the same exact thing. Ares is the Greek term for Mars, the god of war. And Athens is well known for having very important trials. And one of them in Greek mythology was Ares when he killed one of the sons of Poseidon. By the way, Ares, very violent person, god of war, he was found innocent. There was about 400 years prior to Paul coming to Athens, there was a trial for Socrates, I got it wrong, Socrates, right? 399 BC. I asked Alexa this morning, and that's what she told me. And we're going to talk about that briefly, just to kind of think about it. It's a very famous death that came as a result of a trial. And so when we read Acts 17, I think a lot of times we think, well, this is just, they're inviting Paul to come lecture. Tell us about this God that you're talking about. And it may be a little more serious than just a conversation. So we're going to look at verses 16 through 21 very carefully. The sermon itself is short, and we'll try to go a little quicker with that. There is printed material with some notes in the foyer, if you want that, and then we'll look at the response as we close out the chapter this morning. My brother, Jamie Hinds, is here this morning. He's going to be preaching for us, and I put in the bulletin that he is Ray Hinds' son. And so if he does well, then I'll claim him as well. But we're glad that you are here this morning. I see several guests among us. Hope you enjoy our Acts study. I think most of us are regulars. We're ready to go. And so let's take a dive into Acts 17, beginning with verse 16. Let's read these two verses on the screen, verses 16 and 17 of Acts 17. Now, while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him as he saw that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, and in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. There's a lot there. First, let me ask you this. Paul's in Athens. Who is he waiting for? If you look at Acts 17, verses 1 through 15, who is with Paul on his second missionary journey here? Silas and Timothy. And we talked about this briefly at the end of last week, but we know from 1 Thessalonians that Timothy eventually made it to Athens, then went back to Thessalonica, and eventually Silas will also join them, but not in Athens, in Corinth. In fact, if you got Acts 18 available to you, we're going to see Silas and Timothy arrive from Macedonia, which is where Philippi and Thessalonica and Berea are, the northern part of Greece. So they will eventually reunite. Luke does not tell us anything about Timothy going back and forth, but it was really important to Paul to know that the Thessalonians and the Bereans were doing well. And Timothy was able to come back with a good report and say they were remaining faithful despite the persecution. So Paul is alone in Athens. What all has happened to him on this second missionary journey that we might call physical abuse? I mean, never mind the first journey when he was stoned at Lystra, but what else has happened to him? Remember the Thessalonian Jews kicking him out of Thessalonica? Then he goes to Berea, and the Thessalonian Jews go to Berea. They get all these riffraff folks, the rabble, they called them. Paul has been beat up. In fact, Jesus is going to appear to him in a vision in Acts 18 when he's in Corinth and say, "Do not be afraid." And some scholars will say, well, that's Jesus saying, stop being afraid. Paul in 2 Corinthians really reveals the inner turmoil, the angst, the pain that he is experiencing on the second journey. He is being beat up physically, emotionally. And now he's in Athens, and look what it says. I mean, he's not being beat up, but now it says his spirit was provoked within him. What do you think that means? Have you ever been provoked when you see something that just really makes your blood boil?
We must say outrage.
Outrage. Now, is he yelling and screaming? No. But he's angry within. Why? What is he so angry about? The city is full of idols. Now, the verb is used here, provoke. The noun was used back in Acts 15, verse 39, when Batman and Robin split. You remember that? Paul and Barnabas. And so they had that sharp disagreement. That's one word, and it's the noun for provoked. This was a sharp disagreement. As I read Acts 15 as a kid, I always wanted to say, well, they were not yelling. They were being nice to each other. I think they were probably pretty upset back in Acts 15. Paul is upset here at all the idols. Something we are doing on Wednesday nights, I think everyone knows this, who are regulars. On Wednesday nights, we take something that we've studied on Sunday morning and we apply it. We make an Acts application. I was going to do this question: what provokes you? And maybe we will talk about that a little bit, but I do have a couple pages back there. We're actually going to talk about people's concept of God this Wednesday, including our concept of God. And the lesson is called, Your God is Too Small. It's based on the title of a book that came out back in the 50s. But this is a good one too, isn't it? To apply to our lives today. What is it in our world that provokes you like Paul was provoked in Athens? Yes, sir.
It's a strange thing when we actually see it. If you were a Jew and you grew up as a Jew, idols were not accepted. I mean, all 10 Commandments, everything. And you just say, okay. But when you actually see it, as
Right.
Paul did there, it enrages you.
So what does this mean that the city was full of idols? What was going on in Athens? The heyday of Athens was 500 years prior to these events. Athens still was recognized as the intellectual heart of the empire. Eventually, Alexandria, I guess, overtook that because of the big library. But Athens is a very well-respected Roman city. It's past its heyday, but they still had idols everywhere. The famous Parthenon was here in Athens, and its ruins are still there. So let's think about this question a little bit Wednesday night. What is it about our world today that provokes you? I remember as a kid hearing my dad rail against my generation. Kids these days. And I thought to myself, I am not going to do that. Kids these days, let me tell you. Yeah, I do it too. I guess we all do. But there's a lot of issues in our world today. All right, when Paul went to a new city, we know the drill. What did Paul always do on his first journey, on his second journey, on his third journey? If there was a Jewish synagogue in the city, what would he do? Make a beeline. And he would reason from the scriptures about what? Showing them that Jesus is the Christ. We've seen that numerous times. There was one city Paul went to where he didn't go to the synagogue. He went to the riverside and converted Lydia. And we're not told in Acts why, but we speculate the reason is there was no synagogue at Philippi. There was at Thessalonica, there was at Berea, the next two places he went, and there was in Athens. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, the proselytes. But then Luke changes his focus. He doesn't talk about Paul interacting with the Jews in Athens. He focuses on him talking to Athenian philosophers. Doesn't mean Paul didn't interact with the Jewish population at the synagogue like he always did. But the focus here in Acts 17, verses 16 through 34, is the Athenian philosophers. He reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, and he reasoned in the marketplace every day, not just the Sabbath, every day, with those who happen to be there. That word marketplace is a technical word. It's used twice in the book of Acts. We already saw it in Acts 16. Agora, A-G-O-R-A, it's a technical word, and it's like an open-air mall. That might be a good way to compare it. But they also conducted official business there in the marketplace, it's called. And so what happened to Paul at the first Agora that he was at in Philippi? He was dragged there by some slave owners, and they brought him before the magistrates of the city for a trial. Well, that marketplace was also where people did business. It's where they congregated. And so here in Acts 17, verse 17, he is there talking to those who happen to be there. I love that expression. I mean, if you put Paul in a Starbucks just down the street over here, what do you think Paul would do? He'd order his coffee and sit down and not say anything to anybody. Y'all know anybody like Paul who, I mean, they never meet a stranger? Y'all know anybody like that besides Gay West? You're married to one. I mean, wow. Paul just would interact with anybody. And these folks are as foreign to him as, somebody from Zimbabwe would be for us, or Timbuktu. We don't know their culture. We don't know their lifestyle. I mean, but Paul's just talking to anybody about the gospel. He doesn't care who they are. Whoever happened to be there. Well, who happened to be there? Epicurean and Stoic philosophers. My understanding is there were 4 different schools of philosophy that were prominent in Athens. I don't remember the other 2. But those other 2 would not have had as much of an issue with what he says there in verse 18. He was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. Epicureans and Stoics would laugh at the idea of resurrection. Why? I give you a little description in the material. Epicureans are the ones who said, basically, they're paraphrased this way. Let us eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Epicureans believe this is it. There is nothing beyond this life. So, when you start talking about a resurrection, what are they going to say? Yeah, that's just ridiculous. That's wishful thinking. Do you know people like that today? Who eat, drink, and are merry and think, whatever? Or maybe they believe in an afterlife, but they're just not real worried about it. The Stoics. We get our word stoicism from that. You know anybody who's stoic? Not Larry. You know anybody who's just kind of quiet and keeps himself besides Jeff Turner? Who? Yeah, until we get you going, get you talking, and then we can't shut you up. Yeah, stoicism. What is that philosophy? What's in the material?
You know, what's interesting to me is the Stoic philosophy is actually pretty popular today. On Instagram, I follow 3 or 4 different Stoic teachers.
Really?
Yeah, because they quote Marcus Aurelius, who was one of the most famous Stoics. Socrates is said to be the father of Stoicism. But all I'm saying is it's where you're able to keep yourself calm despite the chaos all around.
So how would it clash with the resurrection?
Oh, because you are more in control. Resurrection is a pipe dream. It's something beyond you, and I'm worried about today. I'm worried about what I can control today.
Your emotions, your feelings.
Everything is on you. You are in control of everything.
So Spock would have been a Stoic.
Definitely.
Yeah. Maybe they all had the Vulcan thing.
How they live long and prosper.
So it's interesting that Luke singles out Epicureans and Stoics because, in my understanding, looking at Acts 17, they are the ones who would have problems with the resurrection. And look at what some of them say. Again, we're spending a lot of time on verses 16 through 21 because they are extremely important for the sermon. The first thing they're saying is, what does this babbler wish to say? Does that sound like a compliment? No, it doesn't. In fact, it's worse when you actually look at what it is. This word is talking about like a bird or whatever. I put it in the notes, whatever other animal it is. But they're just pecking. They're pecking at the ground and picking up seed or picking up whatever. You've seen pigeons do that, right? And the idea is this person has just picked up this, he's picked up that, he's picked it up from here, he's picked it up from there. So he knows maybe a lot about a lot of things, or a little about a lot of things, but not enough about anything. And he's just babbling. Just a bunch of silly nonsense. So some people are saying, this guy's an idiot. It would be like that they look at Paul like he's a clown, a circus clown, trying to lecture Harvard physicists. I heard that somewhere, I read that somewhere, and so I'm stealing it. I really like that. Others said he seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities. Now, I pause there for a moment because that is what Socrates was accused of. And he took the hemlock and poisoned himself because he was found guilty of corrupting young minds and introducing new deities. Does Luke intend for us to put that memory in here? And it was only 400 years prior, and we still talk about it 2,400 years later. I don't know. My definitive answer is I don't know. But this is a governing body. You know, we talk about the Sanhedrin Council. The Areopagus is a place, it's a hill, an elevated hill in the city, but it's also a council. The Areopagus Council meets at the Areopagus, Mars Hill. And that's where Paul is about to give his sermon. Now, why are they thinking he's a babbler? Why are they thinking he's preaching of foreign divinities, plural? Well, you got Jesus. He's talking about him as God, but he's also talking about resurrection. And I think by using the plural divinities, what Luke is telling us is these folks think you got Jesus, who's one deity, and you got resurrection, who's another deity. Anastas is the term that they would have used to describe resurrection. The name, the beautiful name Anastasia. Beth, beautiful name, Anastasia. Oh, it's a boy. So, never mind. I love that name, don't you? It means resurrection. And so they're thinking maybe he's talking about two gods, two people. Yes, did I see a hand here?
She jumped out of her seat.
This is Jeff and Karen's last Sunday with us, and so I will allow you 2 comments in class.
I'll get ready.
Okay.
That's one. That's one.
Good. And you're limited to 3.
Oh, man.
Okay. Because you're a visitor. All right. We're almost to verse 22, but not quite. I love this. They took him and brought him to the Areopagus, this hill, Mars Hill, saying, "May we know what Mark, I wasn't ready. May we know what it is, this new teaching that you're presenting? For you bring some strange things to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean." Does that sound polite? May we know? And that's the grammar. I mean, it's a volitional. I mean, they're asking him to do something. And the question becomes, is this like a trial where something bad could happen to him? And what I've read recently is scholars are saying, yes, I don't know. I really don't know, because when he finishes, he just kind of walks away. And there's nothing really said about any trouble he gets in or otherwise. He just goes on to Corinth. I don't know the answer to that. This may be more serious than we think. This is a high council. And just like the Sanhedrin Council was a high council in Judaism. Some strange things to our ears, and I don't have them highlighted, but I should have. Notice in their first question, may we know what this new teaching is, and then we wish to know what these things mean. When you want to, what is the opposite of know? Something that is known, what is the opposite of that? Unknown. We'll take a look at verse 23. He's going to talk to them about the unknown God. Therefore, what you worship as unknown. And then one more time in verse 30, it's translated here as ignorance, but it's the same word. The times of unknownness, the times of ignorance, God overlooked. He is going to make a play on their question or on their inquiry about, well, we want to know this. What is, we wish to know. And he's going to tell them about what they don't know, but they should have known. And so that's really important. And that's why I wanted to walk through that a little bit with you. Verse 21 is a rare aside where Luke is narrating, and he says, now hold on a second. I need to tell you one more thing. And here it is. Now all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new. What are we about to, what kind of audience is he about to address? Are they curious because they really want to know the one true God?
Just want knowledge.
They just want knowledge. Do they, in part, maybe want to be entertained? So if I went over to Jeremy and Larry and Cody, and I said, hey, I just got this magazine about gun oil. And I just smeared a whole bunch of gun oil on my hands and arms, and can you guys smell? And you know what they would do? They'd be like moths to the fire, to the light. Oh, Mark, let's talk about what new thing can we learn about gunpowder and gun smoke or whatever, gun oil. I mean, these guys get excited. How many of you get excited about gun oil? Really? Okay, all right, hey, there you go. You got the wrong Hinds. Hako brought a library book home, and I told him, I'm going to read it to you. It was on bow hunting. First thing, shooting a 10-foot bear. That's how the book started. I had to read them that whole book. I told them about it. You're going to take them bear hunting one day. Or no, not bear hunting. Bow hunting. Okay, all right, not me. Well, here we are. All this is setting up the very short account of Paul's sermon. I'm sure it was much longer. But before we do that, I want to give you a glimpse of what he sees. Now, this is a modern-day picture. In fact, it was taken by Amanda Drum 3 years ago when she was in Athens. She sent it to me and said, hey, here, this is for your Acts book, and now I finally get to use it. There are the remains of the Parthenon, and you see how it's an elevated hill? So in these ancient cities, what they would have, if you don't know this already, they would have this hill in the city where they would have their religious temples. I mean, they had them all over the city, but the really important ones were up on this hill because they're closer to the heavens. That was part of the idea. You see that in the Bible as well, building altars on mountains. But also, this is where the rich people lived. Because if the city is attacked, they're the ones who were the most likely to survive it. Plus, you get the beautiful view of the city. So that's what every city had a hill. An acropolis is what it was called. An acropolis, a raised hill. Everyone did. The most famous is Athens. The Acropolis is here. This is a artist's portrayal of the Parthenon, the way it was supposed to look back then. And this is everywhere. You know what's inside of the Parthenon? What's inside? That'll be in Acts 19, right? Yeah. So this is Athena. This is Athena. Look at that. I mean, this is the city of Athens. She protects the city, and there is this humongous shrine to Athena. No, this is actually a picture that somebody time traveled and took. You see the Roman people walking around? She has in her hand Nike, the god of victory, and she's got this snake, and I can't pronounce the name of the god that this is supposed to be. But her shield, there's this big snake. Anyway, this is what Paul is up against. We want to learn about this new Jesus and this new Anastasia. Tell us about him. And Paul is provoked, but he is, from my reading, he is very kind. This is his shot to talk to, he'll talk to anybody. And this is his shot, and it is one of the most famous sermons in the Bible, and very, very important for the book of Acts. All right, we just spent a lot of our time setting this up, so let's now look at, that's all I have on the screen, these three sections. And I've divided up in this way: God and his relationship to the world at large, God and his relationship to humanity, and then he's going to talk about Jesus and the implications for us. Let's read the whole sermon. It'll only take us a minute and a half. Verse 22, so Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. King James says, too superstitious. For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription, To the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And he talks about humanity now, and he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and boundaries of their dwelling place. Why? That they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. And yet, actually, he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. Being then God's offspring, we ought not to think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of man. The times of ignorance, of unknowingness, God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. That's it. Now, my speculation is Paul would have continued with his sermon, but what happens in verse 32? It seems he's interrupted. People start sneering when he starts talking about resurrection. They're Epicurean and Stoic philosophers. They're going to think this is ridiculous. Don't you love this sermon? I know you've studied it before. Let's take a few minutes to look at it right now. How does Paul begin? He makes a connection with them. Does he start talking about the Old Testament scriptures? No. Why? Why not? Right. So, just like we saw with his first sermon, this is now his second sermon in Acts. His first sermon was also to a... No, that's Pisidian Antioch. I'm getting confused with Lystra. We don't have his sermon there in detail. But, yeah, when Paul was talking to the Lystrans, he didn't talk to them about the Bible. He talked to them about nature. And that's kind of like a little mini version of this sermon. But what connection does he make? They're gods. And apparently they had an idol erected to a god they might have missed, the unknown God. If there's a God out there that we don't know about, well, here's a shrine for him. And Paul is basically saying to them, this God that you think is new, he's right here. You have an altar built to him. Sorry, I'm boring you there. Jeff and Karen are in the process of moving. This is their last Sunday. I guess I already mentioned that. And I know they are worn out. We're going to miss you guys. You better come back and visit. So, God is the God of all. Is he just the God of the Jews? He's the God of all. And he is the maker of heaven and earth. How many times do we read that in the Old Testament? That phrase. Psalm 120, Psalm 121. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth, maker of everything. And he doesn't live in temples made with hands. Does God live in a temple? I mean, yeah, he lives in heaven. The heavenly temple that you see in the book of Revelation. We are that temple that was established in Acts chapter 2, the temple of the Lord. You don't need the old temple anymore. It's de-emphasized. It's in the leadership is the old leadership. You've got the new leadership, the apostles serving Jesus. You've got the body of the Lord, the temple, as Paul describes in Ephesians 1 and 2. He doesn't go into all that, but he says, you're worshiping these idols in their temples, and you built them. You've taken stone and carved it and decorated it with silver and gold. And these are your gods. There is, and I mentioned it in the material, there is a scathing rebuke. We've looked at it in a class on Isaiah 40 through 55. But primarily it's from Isaiah 44. I don't think he's referring to that necessarily, but the mentality is there. What did the prophet Isaiah think of idolatry? What did the prophets think about idolatry? Not just that it was bad, they mocked it as ridiculous. You cut down a tree, and some of it you used to fuel your fire so you can bake your bread. Some of it you construct into furniture, and some of it you make into a god, and you got to prop it up, and you start bowing down to it. Now, I don't know if Paul is citing Isaiah 44 here, but you know he loved Isaiah. You know that's part of his thinking. And he is being kind to them. He's not calling them ridiculous. But he says, these are made by humans for things that aren't really gods. Let me tell you about God. Verse 26 through 29. He made from one man every nation. Who is he talking about there? Adam. From one man, every nation. And he gave them their allotted places, you know, their nations as they separated in Genesis 11. Their determined allotted periods and boundaries of their dwelling place. Verse 27, why? He says ultimately so that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him. Somebody have a different translation there? Instead of feel, grope. What's going on here? This is a word that is highly descriptive. It's like a blind person who is trying to feel their way around because they can't see, and they're trying to find something. And what he's saying is, your unknown God is right here if you will just reach for him. Because, he says, he is not far from us, from each one of us. Now, people need to know that today. Are people looking for God? But they tend to look for God in all the wrong places, if they are looking. And that's what we're here for, to direct them to the temple of the Lord, to come into the presence of God. And that's what Paul is trying to do. What is Paul really getting at here? What does he want them to do? What is he asking the Athenians to do? The times of ignorance God overlooked, verse 30, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. He wants them to repent. What does that look like? What does that mean?
The word repentance means to change your mind.
Well, I know what it means.
He's trying to convince them to think differently.
All right, to think differently and do what?
Turn to God.
Turn to God, okay. But what about all their idols? What about all their shrines? What about all their processions that go on every day, all the time?
Right now, he's not explicitly saying, "I'll need to tear it all down," but that's kind of the inference.
Okay, and that is at least your seventh comment. That's it. I'm cutting you off. Zach.
Yeah, to your previous statement about people of today,
Yeah.
it says people of Athens, I see that you are extremely religious in every aspect. He's saying like you're so close. Like,
Okay.
you have the want and the need and the desire to be it, you're just missing the mark.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The King James Version is the only one, I think, that says too superstitious right there. Don't you love that? Is there a connection between superstitious and religious? There's a connection there. This is a broad word. I should have talked about it. It's a broad word. It has a broad range of meanings is what I'm trying to say. And superstition can be that. But they are just obsessed with gun oil. I mean, they're just obsessed about learning about anything and everything they can about, in this case, the gods. And all the gods that exist out there. The god of war, the god of water, or the ocean, or the god of the sky, the god of the city of Athens, the god of this, the god of that. And what is Paul saying to them? There's one God who made everything. And if God made everything, what does that mean in terms of the gods? They don't really exist. He is above them all. Jesus is Lord of lords and King of kings. Philippians 2, that he is above every name. There is nothing that supersedes God. He is the ultimate in every way. And our building, is this a shrine? Is this a temple? We talk about going to church, and what that means is we're going to the assembly of the people, the followers of Jesus. But this is not the church. We use it accommodatively. I get that. I don't mind that. The word church just means the assembly of the Lord. This is not a sacred building. Nothing sacred about it, except my office. Stay out of there. This is a fantastic sermon for our 21st century world right now. And he is talking about God's relationship with us. And then not only does Paul relate to them about the unknown God, but verse 28, in him we live and move and have our being. I love that the English Standard Version keeps that King James language, but the more modern translations render it a little differently, a little more literally. But I like that. And this is a line from a poet, a Greek poet, actually from Crete. It's from a poem, the opening line of a poem by Epimenides. I have no idea who that is. But Paul did. Isn't that neat?
Interestingly enough, Epimenides was Stoic.
Okay. I don't have that in my notes here, but he was a Stoic. Okay. You see, I just can't get him to be quiet. I just can't. That's right. So very good. That's excellent. I'm going to steal that. So Epimenides is a Stoic philosopher. And he says, your own philosophy talks about the one true God. And then he does it again. Even as some of your own poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. Now, in the context of both of these, it's talking about Zeus. Zeus is the source of life. Who is Zeus? In Greek mythology, he is the head god. And he is now applying it to the one true God. Now, is Paul saying that Epimenides and Erastus, the Aratus, or however you say his name, that these guys were inspired by God when they said these things? No, they're making an observation, and they happen to be right. And Paul, being well-read, of course, he's also inspired, he makes that connection with them. What kind of effect do you think that would have had on his audience? For him to just pull that out. Is this guy really a babbler? Is he really just, picking stuff out? Maybe he is a Harvard physicist after all. You read Paul's letters. How many of you just love reading Romans because you understand every word of it? I mean, it's a marvelous book. It is called Paul's magnum opus. It's his longest letter. It's just, wow. Justification by faith and all of that. Wow. Paul's no dummy. And here he is preaching to these folks, and they're quickly learning. He knows his stuff. So moving on to verse 30. Verse 30. Verses 30 and 31. The times of ignorance God overlooked. He's going back to the beginning of his sermon when he talked about the unknown God, what you don't know. The times of not knowing are over. What does that mean then? What are the implications for the millennia? All this time, pagans have worshiped other gods, and God has overlooked that. What does that mean? Now you're quiet. It's kind of, the best way to answer that is we'll let God worry about that. Is this saying that God allowed them to worship the way they saw fit? Do you know the passage that really would fill in a lot of Paul's thinking here? Romans 1, where he talks about the Gentile world not knowing God. Did I put that in here? No, I didn't. Where they worship the creature rather than the creator. I didn't put that in here. Oh well. And so what he's trying to get them to do is give up their idols. Give your idols up. Remember we did a little series on that Wednesday nights recently? And he says, let me tell you how you should know this, because there's a person, Jesus. He doesn't call him Jesus here, but he was talking about him by name earlier in Athens. Verse 31, we're about to run out of time. Because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man, that's Jesus, of course, whom he has appointed. How do we know he's appointed him? Because he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. And this is how they respond. Verses 32 through 34, we're out of time. My brother talked too much. Now, when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, you got three responses. Some mocked. Others kicked the can down the road. We will hear you again about this. But then there is a third response. And what is that? Some join. Now, how important are some of these people? Dionysius, the Areopagite. This is one of the council members. This would be like Nicodemus or Joseph of Arimathea, members of the Sanhedrin Council, becoming disciples. And a woman, you know how Luke always is referring to men and women, Got to include a woman in there, Damaris, and others with them. So has Paul written a letter to the Athenian church? What, has he written a letter to them? No. Was a church established? We're not told. But it makes you think that there probably was, because you have disciples. Well, we covered a lot of ground today, and I hope we did it in a way where you can go back and study further for yourself. Next week, we will be in Corinth. Paul has no problems. He's not hurt in any way. He's provoked. He's emotionally worn out, but he is going to make his way to Corinth. When he's at Corinth, Jesus is going to appear to him and say, Paul, you're going to be okay. And Paul is going to stay there for 1.5 years. And we're going to talk about that next week, when Paul is at Corinth. Thank you for going through Paul's speech at the Areopagus this morning.